National housing
Is
scam.
the NHT rent to own policy by the PNP a national housing scam? The PNP would have been on record to say that the rent to own model is their idea. They came up with it exclusively. But is that true? Is that true? Because there's another organization we all are familiar with, Caribbean Policy Research Institute, that published this document in 2016, an assessment of the National Housing Trust, where they looked at the possibility of renting homes via the NHT to Jamaicans that are at the lower end of the scale. Yes. So the idea of renting homes to Jamaicans was caprice, not the PNP. And I will show you in my next video that the rent to own housing solution via the NHT is not the brainchild of the PNP. It never was. So when they're out here championing it to say that it is their idea, they first thought of it. Not true. Not true. If the PNP can present document that predates 2016, then I will concede that I was misinformed and ill-informed. Now, in part one, we asked some questions. We spoke about the possibility of whether or not the rent-to-own NHT homes as a policy was really a PNP thing, whether or not the PNP actually owned the idea, and we would have proven that Capri was the organization that first spoke about the possibility of NHT offering homes for rental. Now, we all know that the government changed in September 3rd, 2016, when the Jamaica Labour Party won and they would have formed government. The incoming Jamaica Labour Party government, led by Dr. the Most Honorable Andrew Holness, would have tasked the National Housing Trust with a review of its mandate and its commitment to building homes for the Jamaican people and how they could best ramp up this process. Let us look at that. So, the National Housing Trust Strategic Mandate Review Commission report, and this was done in November of 2017. November 2017. So this report was generated on November 2017. Look who are the commissioners. So, who remember Dr. Nigel Clark, one of Jamaica's finest Minister of Finance that we have ever gotten. And we see some of the popular names there. Dr. Damian King, among others. These were the commissioners that looked at the NHT, its operation, its mandate, and possible fix in terms of how could the NHT increase the housing output to meet the demands of the Jamaican people. Now, after the commission had evaluated the NHT and its structure and its mandate, they sent a report to the Office of the Prime Minister. And this was sent on the 7th of November 2017. And it as follows. The Most Honorable Andrew Holness, Prime Minister of Jamaica. Dear Prime Minister, report of the Commission on the strategic review of the mandate of the National Housing Trust. Further to the establishment of a commission to conduct a strategic review of the mandate of the National Housing Trust, we are pleased to enclose herein the report of the Commission. The Commission was established in October 2016 to examine the operation of the NHT. Considering the structure of Jamaica housing finance sector, the structural and non-structural measures to reform the public segment of the housing finance sector, the task was to be completed within the government's broader plan and framework for a national shelter strategy. In the conduct of its work, the Commission considered a range of issues related to housing and the role that the NHT does and ought to have in the delivery of housing solutions for the benefit of the Jamaican society. Our deliberation and recommendation include consideration of the following: rationalizing public sector housing finance with particular emphasis on the unique role of the NHT in the public sector segment of the housing finance system. Examine supply and demand dynamics of the housing market. Evaluating the performance of the NHT and the other public sector participants in the housing sector to establish the most effective method of optimizing the production, delivery of housing for Jamaicans. Examining the governance framework and to recommend the most appropriate mechanism by which the rationalized public housing sector is to be governed. While the original terms of reference for the Commission provide a helpful outline to set appropriate parameters and boundaries for the discussion, the terms themselves gave rise to a number of related issues that the Commission deemed appropriate to the conduct of its work. These are set out more specifically in the body of the report. In considering its recommendations, the Commission gave regard to the legal and operational requirements of implementing the options and the importance of ensuring that the recommendations are workable and practical. And during this commission, Jamaican, the Commission looked at the feasibility of rent to own as an option for Jamaicans. So when you hear the PNP out there saying that the Jamaica Labour Party stole their idea, which they presented in their manifesto in 2020, this report proves that those allegations from the PNP are false and misleading. And I will give you more about this report and what they said about the rent-to-own policy from that feasibility study. Part 3. Now, welcome to the season finale of the PNP housing scam, con, I don't know. So we already found out that in terms of rental, it was first spoken about by Capri. We also know that a report was submitted to the Office of the Prime Minister on the 7th of November 2017, detailing aspects of how they plan to deal with the NHT going forward. Now, the NHT Commission was asking themselves several questions. And if you go on page 126 to where I'm at now, you'll see the analysis of various forms that they needed to improve the housing stock. And this is the one that I'm interested in. On page 146, it says, and they're asking a question now, as part of the National Sector Strategy, should the NHT offer properties for rental? Some Jamaicans, and speaking about the issues here, despite being gainfully employed, are unable to purchase a home, and in some cases, these persons utilize the option of rental in the private real estate market. It goes on. The Commission contemplated whether offering properties for rental would address the issue of affordability facing low-income earning Jamaicans. The following options were considered in an effort to determine whether an NHT subsidy could be used to address the issues. They looked at 1. The rent-to-own model, where the government through the NHT would play the role of landlord. So when Mark Gola and PNP is saying that the rent-to-own is theirs, no. This thing was sitting on the Prime Minister's desk from 2017. Right? 1. Providing properties for rental, possibly through employers creating a public real estate market. Or 2. The NHT acting as a market maker in the rental market. And they goes to speak on the impact this would have, right? Under the rent-to-own model, the tenant would be granted the option to purchase the home with their periodic rental payments being applied to the purchase price of the home. The rental model would allow beneficiaries to rent properties at subsidized rates. The Commission contemplated two structures. One, a direct landlord-tenant relationship where the property is owned by the NHT and offered to low-income earning Jamaicans. Two, a landlord relationship through employers such as hotel owners. It goes on to further say, the NHT acting as a market maker in the rental market is likely to involve a change in the policy to stimulate second home purchase to acquire a second home for rental. The Commission discussed and agreed that a number of challenges are likely to arise with the application of any of these models. So when they looked at the rent to own, they begin to see problems there. And they're asking questions. Does the NHT have the administrative capacity or expertise to manage these types of options? Question that we should ask. Is the NHT able to control the rental rates offered to employees by the employers? Who should be responsible for maintaining the property? Fundamental questions. Should the NHT put control of employee shelter in the hands of employers? What happens if the tenant can no longer afford to pay the rent? What will happen then if they are no longer able to pay the rent? Here, the Commission gave their recommendations. Using the available data from the NHT on housing demand versus housing supply, while a number of challenges underline the housing system in Jamaica, the significant shortfall between demand and supply is a fundamental problem of availability of appropriate solution at the right price based on the various segments of the market. And the brilliant commissioners gave their recommendations that Jamaicans should pay attention to. The Commission recommends that the NHT avoid pursuing any element of the rental market modalities present herein for the following reasons. And until the PNP explains how they will overcome this, Jamaicans should not take them serious. To the extent that a fundamental challenge in the market is the supply of housing solution, it is not clear that the introduction of a public rental market would significantly increase supply. To the extent that the owner of a property would expect that on a long-term basis under a rental agreement, they would recover both the capital invested and generate a return on the capital, it is not clear that through the rental market, without extensive support from the NHT, there would be any incentive to price the solution below market and pass on any subsidy to the renter. Mark Golding and the PNP needs to explain all of this to the Jamaican people, how they plan to overcome these challenges. If the NHT opts to hold and rent the units either on a rent-to-own or other rental modalities, the literature and the experience of other countries reviewed by the Commission suggests that there are a number of underlying outcomes, including in the public rental modality, there is a limited or no incentive for the renter to focus any great effort on maintenance of the underlying asset if they have no long-term stake in it. The administrative burden of managing a significant non-commercial rental portfolio presents a high risk to the NHT, and the NHT could bleed capital from here. Under a rent-to-own model, to the extent that the cost of recertification of any modification to the housing prior to transfer would rest with the NHT, this would represent a significant contingent liability. The PNP needs to explain to the Jamaican people how they are going to go about doing this rent-to-own and overcome the hurdles and challenges that exist what we see internationally in countries who have tried to do this.